Transmitting live from outer space to your browser, I'm EBEXE, and today I'm going to show you, my soon-to-be faithful organics, how I crossed the stars and made my fully rigged VTuber model in only 3 days, with no prior knowledge of Live 2D and saving hundreds of dollars in the process. When I started this project, I didn't expect to blaze through it like I did. A perk of hyperfixation, but in the midst of executive dysfunction. To be fair, I had been thinking about doing this project for years now. Once I got into the groove of rigging my model, I really lost track of time, and it went by super quickly. But my back is another story. It's still killing me for shrimping for hours at my desk. With that said, let's get ready for takeoff. When it came to designing the model, there were a few goals that I had in mind for it. They were making a chibi, separating out the arms, and making the legs capable of animation. The reason I wanted to make a chibi was because it's a great option for first-time models. It gave me a lot of creative freedom, and since chibis are noticeably less detailed, it made drawing them so much faster. Now, my chibi style tends to be on that uncanny valley of not quite a full chibi, but definitely not a full body, but I'm not tempted to render it like I would a full piece. For the arms, I wanted to have them separated out so that if I wanted to add arm toggles in the future, it'd be a lot easier. This will be a future project for now, but having the baseline of the arms already partitioned out means it'll be easier for me to create these toggles when I actually get around to making them. The legs I also wanted to animate, but didn't feel I needed to get too involved in separating them out like the arms. I don't have body tracking, so just having these pieces will be enough to add a little flavor of motion. In Procreate, I made my original file size 6,000 by 6,000. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend the size to most people, especially because with VTuber models, your layer count matters. Separating left and right is vital, and with a dimension of 6,000, I hit my layer limit pretty quick. It didn't help that I hadn't set up my layers preferences before, but luckily, I could crop my picture and over time give myself additional layers. At this stage, I'm not bothering to separate left from right, and you can do that in Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, or even GIMP later on in the process, so I didn't bother with it right now. Gotta make every layer count at this point. My canvas being so huge means that when I inevitably have to shrink down my file to fit a computer screen, the messy line art is not nearly as visible. I also do this for my emotes, which are super sketchy at their full resolution, but are completely normal once shrunken down to emote size. This attention to layer count is especially important for me because I have an entire layer dedicated to the full body mockup. Notice those lines next to her? That's my ladder test. The ladder test is a great way to quickly check to see if your design is visually intriguing. Too much like a ladder and it indicates that your design is flat. Of course, some characters will look interesting even with a ladder, but I try to avoid it as I'm prone to too much symmetry. Having resting space makes a design a lot easier to read and can be used to focus a viewer's attention on certain details. I felt that my color design would be too chaotic. If I had a bunch of pieces included, it'd be kind of hard to focus on any one part of her. For me, with all of my bright colors, I made the scleras, aka the whites of her eyes, dark purple. I feel it gives a good contrast that draws people's attentions to the eyes and therefore the center of her face. Keeping in mind how your design elements and color palette work together will help make your character more distinct and legible. Other techniques besides the ladder test include the silhouette test and color theory. Yume Kuzikawa and Squeegee both have really informative videos on these topics, so I highly recommend checking them out. I've left a link in the description below so you can check those out for more VTuber designing theories. Overall, my biggest advice to people is be kind to your art style. Your art does not have to be a certain way in order for it to be Live 2D friendly. All art is Live 2D friendly, as long as you have your separations in. You could make a Fortiche style or Muppet style character work just as easily as making a Mori Calliope character work. Anyway, now that I've made my chibi, I'm going to export her to Clip Studio Paint. In Clip, I can create my layer groups and separate everything out that I didn't do before in Procreate. I also added in a black airbrush dot at her neck, but we're gonna put a pin on that last bit. With everything sorted, here's my super legit, super normal layer hierarchy. The head I split into 7 subcategories. I've got the ear bulbs, the upper hair, outstanding lashes, lower hair, eyes, mouth, and face base. Outstanding lashes is an outlier from usual hierarchies because I wanted the outer corner of my lashes to sit on top of my hair. I just think it's neat when chibi lashes show over the hair. The other thing I want to note on my head layers is my lips. Don't do my lips. Don't do this. This right here, this lip is connected to the lipstick. What? It made rigging her mouth a nightmare, and literally, the introductory V-Bridger guide discusses this, but I hadn't watched it yet, so don't do what I do. The legs, much like the torso, aren't anything to write home about, just the balls, thighs, knees, and lower legs. In total, this model took me about 7 hours to make. Now, I usually do commissions by the hour, with $20 an hour being my rate. So that means that this model's art would cost $140, which I think is fairly in line with the industry standard for a model that is ready to rig. After all of that said and done though, it's GG. I decide I'm gonna deal with Live 2D the next day and just go to bed.
Welcome, babies, to the Fruity Pebbles Castle of Torment, a scary castle with 100 rats.
Okay, so Live 2D looks intimidating. This was my first time using it, and I was completely lost as to what to do. Luckily, we live in the age of YouTube, which means that there are hundreds of tutorials out there for Live 2D. But for me, for my money, it's gonna be Merrily Wu-Fei every time. Seriously guys, if you want to learn how to rig a model, go follow her beginner's tutorial. I have the link down in the description below that has her entire series. And I think it is the best resource out there for new Live 2D riggers. I did end up taking some creative liberties. Since I decided to use my own model with my own hierarchy, it meant that not everything was in the same folder or could be connected to one another the way that hers were. Again, personal projects mean personal mess. As long as you stay within the overarching folders, for example, as long as everything you wanted in the head XY deformer stayed in that parent head section, you can move things around into other subcategories. Halfway through Merrily's tutorial, she explained mask layers for the disappearing neckline, and what is this? It's an aforementioned pin! Before her tutorial, I didn't really understand what a masking layer for a VTube model meant. For goofballs like me, who are confused by what masking layers are, it's just a clipping layer. In Live 2D, there's an option to inverse clip a layer, meaning you can cover and erase parts of the layer. Kind of like a disappearing act, which is how many VTubers achieve that super effective disappearing neckline look. I went back into Clip Studio and I added the black airbrush layer and dragged the updated VSD file into Live 2D because as long as your layers are named the same, they'll just update the textures without changing the deformers, even if you've moved them around. I want to give some conceptual knowledge to the deformers that really helped me follow along her tutorial and understand Live 2D in general. By that, I mean it is so much easier to understand when you realize they are just 3D planes. Okay, so hear me out. This seems excessive, but I promise this will make editing deformers so much easier mentally. So we have a plane here. If I add in a few loop cuts, you can create these vertices. And as you can see, when I'm pulling on these vertices, I'm deforming its shape. This is essentially what is happening to your art. Live 2D is creating a 3D plane with the components you've grouped and allows you to just squish and squash them around. So if we go back to my model, you can see that I've made my nose vertex overlap itself to give it a defined line instead of using a masking layer to create that look. Of course, this is a chibi model, so I can stylistically get away with that, but the point still stands. play around with those vertices and push and fold strong shapes like you're creating a beautiful origami piece of VTuber goodness. During this second day, I spent 6 hours just doing my basic head XYs. It was a lot to learn, and I was just happy to have the head turn. Kinda. I was getting tired at this point though, so I became a mimir and called it a day. This was it. I felt it in my bones. I got back on Live 2D and with refreshed eyes was able to fix a lot of the XY problems I had. I also went about doing the mouth shapes. They were, to put it lightly, the bane of my existence because, again, the lip option that I had chosen was the wrong one. But, I just had to work around that. I also didn't give it enough skin coverage for the upper and lower lip, so I had tons of moments where my mouth was peeking out behind the deformers of my mouth. So I definitely recommend making your skin pieces bigger for your mouth. Better to have too much and cut it away than not having enough at all. Once I had finally mapped everything out, I could play around with physics. And physics are so fun. I spent quite a while just watching my character bob around in position A, just kind of enjoying seeing her flap about. There's something just hypnotic about it. This was a long day though. Between the rest of the face and the body, it took me about 10 hours to finish. Again, if we're doing the cost example with every hour being 20 bones.
The bones are the skeletons' money. In our world, bones equal dollars.
Then this 16-hour rigging was running me 320 bones. Adding the model cost, and we're looking at 460, which, if my math is correct, that's at least 5 Jimmy John sandwiches, give or take. With rigging finally done, I went to face my final hurdle, which was setting up my model in VTuber Studio. Okay, VTuber Studio is actually super easy, which is of course why I struggled to set it up. If I could learn to do basic rigging in less than 24 hours, then it only seemed fair that I would suck absolute balls at getting the setup to work. Now, I already own an iPhone, so I thought, wow, convenient! But I forgot to account for myself. I, no joke, turned this 5-minute process into a 45-minute journey. Eventually, I got it to work, I chilled out, and I could get all of the rest of it rolling, which meant that I was now just doing tweaks and adjustments. After some more adjustments and a few more visits to Live 2D to edit some egregious errors, like finding out some of my textures overlapped, oops, I finally arrived at the final product. Here I am. I wibble and I wobble and I have a little bit of body motion. Wahoo! Oh man, I feel so good about finishing this project. As I mentioned, years had wanted to do this, and now that it's done, I just feel great. Overall, I'm really happy with how this came out. I think that it really kind of broke me out of an art funk, and it's just been really fun to just stare at myself doing this all day. I would say for anyone else who is excited about making their model, definitely just go for it and be okay if you're missing some features, because it's better to have a model now and add stuff in later than never finish your model at all. I hope my 3-day odyssey inspires you to take on a big art project for yourself, and I just think that if you shoot for the stars, you'll land among the moon, and I'm thinking that I might have messed that metaphor up, but I'm not gonna change it. Remember to check the links below that I mentioned before, and I would really appreciate it if you would like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me some of your art journeys or your art projects that you've been not procrastinating on, but taking some time to think about. Have an out of this galaxy day, and remember,
Now that I've gotten on the internet, I'd rather be on my computer than doing just about anything.